Welcome Cosmic Comics, Games and Collectibles, your zen of geekism. We carry comics old and new, magazines, toys, games like Pokemon, Magic, D&D. Want Godzilla, Ultraman, Star Trek, Ninja Turtles, Funko Pops? You'll find it all here. Shop our Cosmic Sound Room and pick up a record or two. Enjoy our Comic Coffee Lounge with a cup of Sasquatch coffee while geeking out over a super cool movie on our big screen. Cosmic Comic, Games and Collectibles. Superman loves us, and so will you.
Hi everyone, Jason Hunt here, inviting you to join us every Saturday morning for news, the week's headlines in science fiction, fantasy, horror, comic books, video games, plus Comic-Con updates and the weather, and the occasional interview along the way. We call it Good Morning Multiverse. We hope you join us every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 Central, right here on Sci-Fi for Me TV.
I'm ready for that. Hello, everybody. This is RJ Carter, Senior Managing Editor here at CriticalBlast.com, Chief Envelope Licker for Critical Blast Logistics, myopic proofreader for Critical Blast Publishing, and I will help you with your data issues when you call me up for your crowdfunder through Critical Blast Consulting. Tonight, it is a momentous occasion. We have a schedule announcement here. This will be the last episode of the LCS Guys to happen on a Saturday. We are pushing it back. We are going to start doing this on a Friday. So if you have this on your calendar, just turn 2 weeks into the future and pull it back one day. We're going to have this on a Friday night now. It's going to be a little bit easier on everybody else's schedule, which means we're going to get to bring in some of the old crew back onto the show, have some, broader conversations. I know Dave Dyer's had tons of things he's wanted to say, but he's thriving in his business. He's opening up another store, different kind of market, not comics, but he's staying in the comic business as well. So he's expanding, doing very well. Wish the best for him. And we'll be talking with him in 2 weeks minus a day. There's not a name for that, fortnight. This is a 2 week period, but there's not a period. Yeah, just 13 days. Just put that on your calendar. The next 13 days, we'll have more people here. But we still have some of the best and most informed conversation about comics from a man who's been in the business for 40 years, brick and mortar retail stores, contributor to ICV2 and the Overstreet Price Guide, and a few other places. Plus, he's a comic book creator himself, so he gets what you guys are into. Michael, welcome to the show, sir.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, RJ.
Oh, I feel like a lot of stuff has happened in the last 2 weeks, and then when I sit down and try to think about what it is, I'm like, what did happen in the last 2 weeks? and then I realized it was all stuff that just happened to me. It's like, lots of comics. Well, what happened in comics? Well, I got this comic in the mail. This was a nice, thick graphic novel, Trolls Exposed, by our good friend Chris Milovich. And then I got this thicker book in the mail, which was Cthulhu Invades Wonderland, which is a huge book with a springboard into Cthulhu Invades Oz. Both of them anthologies. And then, of course, just the other day, I got from our good friends over at Miskatonic High the latest issue of that. All of these, Michael, all of these are crowdfunder books. Well, I think Miskatonic High is making its way into brick and mortar now, from issue 1 going forward. But
good for them.
As a retailer, how do you compete with and I'm not, this is all theoretical now, but I mean, if you're getting DC and Marvel and the books that go through the distributors, and you see this other market that people are gravitating toward, what would be your approach to saying, I need to compete with that, or I need to get that for my customers?
Well, my attitude about it is the more the merrier. I mean, it's like when I had my stores, like I've been doing this for 40 years, and so that goes all the way back to like 1982. I'm actually my 40th anniversary is coming up real quick. And, there used to be comics in every grocery store, every 7-Eleven. The newsstand racks had them all over the place. And, hey, how you doing there, Woody? And so then, they started making them mature. People started complaining. They started selling things to kids that they should not have sold kids because the spinner racks didn't say, hey, kids, comics.
Yeah.
The comics didn't anymore. And they had no warnings on them. And bam, next thing you know, they got pulled. Once a Walmart heiress bought the wrong thing for one of her grandkids. And bam, that was it in the South in Walmart. And grocery stores, 7-Elevens, all those places went away. And everybody thought they quit making comics until they started to advertise, hey, we're making these digital comics now. They're like, they're still made. Let me go get the real thing. So, the more places that you can buy comics, I think it's just great. I mean, just bring it on. Everybody get in the game. I mean, I don't want to see a door, hammered over and nailed shut on the industry where people can't get into it anymore. And so I think it's great to see that stuff. Now, me for my stores, right now I've switched over to mail order. But if I still had my stores, half my rack space was always dedicated to independents. So I'd be like looking, okay, who's got a good bulk deal? Because what I always based my purchases on, somebody asked me about something. Can you get that? I go find it. That's my job. I always consider myself to be a purchaser, not a comic book store owner. And so when people say, this is what I want, I'm going to go get it for them.
Yeah, because if one person wants it and says they want it, 3 more people want it but didn't say anything.
Right. When I was on the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund cruise, all these different creators were coming up to me going, hey, how do I get my books in your store? And I kept telling them, you got to get people asking me for it. You got to get people interested in it. Because I go by a multiplication of the interest I've heard. And a multiple of 0 is still 0.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to order, 5 times, the number of requests. The number of requests is 0s, doesn't come out.
No, it depends on who's asking, too. I mean, if it's the same guy asking 5 times, okay, that doesn't count so much. And there are people who will do that. Then you got the shills who, if you get a phone call request, you don't pay a lot of attention to that because you have people calling stores around trying to pretend like there's interest. So it's actually people that you know. And then who is it? Does that person have good taste, or is that somebody, oh, he only buys that weird stuff nobody else wants to read? I better watch out on that.
Yeah, get him the 1 copy he asked for.
Right, exactly. Yeah, but then there's that person has pretty good taste, or these people, or that's got appealing to a wide audience. There's just so many factors into it. You're just, as a retailer, you listen. And it's like when I was always a guest at the Summer Lorette University for Youth, where, gifted and talented kids, had summer speakers come talk to them. And they'd always, change out the speakers, a couple of years at most. I went every single year because I was always the first program that was booked up. And, it used to, it was always young boys. Well, then all of a sudden I realized, hey, it's all girls now because they signed up first. And all the boys were there. Too late, man. You got to act a little faster. And so I started listening in those things. And that's when I realized the manga thing was coming around. So I was at the front end of the manga until they started giving all those advantages to the chain bookstores, just completely cut out. The retailers made it complete disadvantage just where we couldn't sell it anymore. But you listen to what your customers are telling you they want. And so that's one thing. I don't really read a lot. I used to read almost everything that came out. Then I opened up my second store. Well, 2 stores is the worst combination you have. I mean, 3 stores, okay, now you're big enough, you got to develop an infrastructure. With 2 stores, you're just doing the work of 2 stores. And my reading really cut back. And then also I found out that I was actually ordering better when I wasn't reading the books, because I didn't get my bias. And they're like, oh, that looks like a great book. Everybody's going to want that. What do you mean nobody bought it? Or, oh, that looks awful. Wait a minute, everybody's asking for it? So I learned to just go by feedback, So I'll be going through the catalog, and I'll look at something like, oh, I hadn't heard about that. Hey, that looks pretty good. Wait a minute. Not one person's expressed an interest in that. Okay, keep flipping the pages.
Yeah, but you'd have to think that at some point, though, there's a blurred area where your customer and they haven't asked for it, but maybe they don't know about it.
Oh yeah, well,
you
that's
make them aware of it.
Readers, like, oh, that writer, yeah, certain people are going to want that guy, certain artists want that guy. Oh, is that writer? Okay, start cutting the orders. I know I won't be able to cut them fast enough, but that guy chases readers off faster than anybody. It's knowing your business and your market. It's not necessarily reading the stories and being a fan.
Yeah. Speaking of cuts, wow, DC is got to be shaking, and because David Zaslav, CEO of Discovery, is taking a hacksaw to everything DC lately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, $95 million movie. Yeah, just throw it in the trash can.
Yeah, well, I mean, and everybody's like, well, why would you throw away a $95 million movie, instead of putting it out? I'm like, because there's another $90 million to be spent on it first before it's done.
Yeah. They know what they were looking at. I mean, they may have taken a look and said, well, yeah, we're not going to even get the other 90 back. If we keep advertising, put more money into it. That's something I've explained to a couple of people that were fans. Like, well, we've got it made. They've already spent $95 million. Yeah, but they got to keep spending more money, get it out there. And if you don't think you're even going to get that back, cut your losses. Yeah.
Cause it's made, but it's not made. They haven't done all the post effects on it yet. So none of the CG is on there. It's
and then
it's raw footage,
and you get that advertising budget. Wow, that's sometimes which is what the movie costs to make. So
absolutely. Hello, Alejandro. Good to see you, man. So yeah, I look at it and I'm like, what if this had happened to Catwoman back in the day?
Which it had of.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, after. Yeah, the advertising market is saved. Yay! That's money that they can put to better use somewhere else. But yeah, Catwoman came out and it was
awful.
Batman and Robin came out and they were still making DC comic book movies. Catwoman came out and killed it. There was nothing from DC for 15 years, 20 years almost.
It was pretty awful.
It killed everything they could do. That could have been what Batgirl might have done. Just judging from what we were hearing from it.
They've released some pretty dog movies here, like the New Mutants movie. That was an element that would have worked in a story, but that wasn't a movie. That was just like the back plot to a movie, and then you have another story going on, and that's filler for it. That wasn't a whole movie. That was. I'll tell you another movie that they kind of really. Or a TV series that they messed up on. Have you seen the Obi-Wan Kenobi yet?
I have not, nor shall I. I do not have DC streaming, or Disney streaming.
I saw it available on a DVD online at eBay. So I was like, yeah, okay, I'll see it. And just to quote Darth Vader, unimpressive, most unimpressive. It's basically, I think what they did was they took an idea where they, because they had a movie that bombed. They started doing really bad at the theater. And so they started to say, well, okay, people don't want those solo movies anymore, but they had a whole bunch in the pipeline. So I think they took their plot line for an Obi-Wan Kenobi, maybe 2.5 hour movie. Let's stretch it out into 6 episodes.
Yeah.
And it was awful.
There wasn't enough meat on that bone to stretch out.
Obi-Wan Kenobi's in a fight on another planet. There's this one thing's going on yet another planet. He has time to finish that fight with Darth Vader about 3 different times. and then at the conclusion of that fight, hop in his ship, fly to the other planet, and get there right for the conclusion of that fight.
Yes.
Okay, did anybody bother thinking about this at all? You know?
No. Obi-Wan's job was to watch Luke grow up and make sure he didn't die.
So when he was in trouble, he wasn't around.
Yeah. So.
What a good. Yeah.
And anything you put in an Obi-Wan Kenobi movie has the risk of blowing apart the canon of what was already known before. You're like, well, he can't do this because if he'd done this, then he would not have ever done that.
Right.
So
they were kind of boxed in that way.
Carefully.
And I thought they had an element for a good movie. It just, the execution wasn't there. Just, it was not a 6 1 hour episodes. The material wasn't there for that.
Yeah. And, if you get a long running Obi-Wan Kenobi movie or series and everyone's like, Obi-Wan over here, come help us, Obi-Wan. And then you think, well, they kept calling him Obi-Wan for years. And Luke meets him, says, I'm looking for Obi-Wan. That's a name I haven't heard in a long time. It's like, you mean like a couple of years ago?
Yeah. Half the planet knows that guy.
Yeah, exactly. He's been all over the place. You've got flyers out with your address on it. But I don't get into any of the Disney streaming because I have too much already. Last thing I need is to get Disney streaming, which is kind of a shame because that's where I know the new Daredevil series is going to go over to Disney Plus. So
yeah, I'll buy it if it's available on Blu-ray or DVD. I'll buy it, but I'm not going to pay for another subscription.
That's what I do.
And there's a lot of stuff I have not seen available, so I guess I won't watch that. Like I guess the Scarlet Witch shows she had was kind of a lead up to the new Doctor Strange movie, and okay, I kind of got what happened in that. So the movie told you, so I'm good. I'm not going to worry about watching it.
Well, I think that
Wanda was an Olsen twin.
Well, she's not one of the twins. She's the younger sister.
Okay.
Now, the twins are her older sister.
Okay, so she's an Olsen sister, just not one of the twins. Okay.
Yeah, she's not one of the two twins. Yeah, this makes you feel old that they are older than her. In fact, you can see her when they did the Mary-Kate and Ashley mysteries. When kids in sleuths, they wore the trench coats and the hats and all that good stuff. She appeared in an episode as their little sister that they had to try to ditch.
But she's a good actress. So.
Yeah. Now I think the whole multiverse aspect that Marvel beat DC to the theater with DC's toys. The multiverse has always been DC's thing, and that's probably my theory. That's why the Flash movie hasn't been released when they said it would be. They pushed it back a year because they didn't want people to say, "Oh, look, now everybody's doing a multiverse movie." But because there was the Doctor Strange, of course there was the Spider-Man No Way Home movie, and outside of Marvel there was that Everything Everywhere All at Once multiverse movie that they were playing with, and Warner probably said, "You know what? Multi-fatigue going on here. Let's put it. It's in the can. It's done. Let's put it on a shelf."
Yeah, in 1977, I did my first self-published magazine, and my stories and art, The Multiversal Scribe. So back then, it was like the multi what? Like it was a word they never heard of. Like, no, that means many universes.
Yeah, exactly. And they just put it on a shelf. They're like, it'll be great to release it next year. We'll just we'll ride the popularity of it and we'll put it out then. What could possibly go wrong than Ezra Miller?
Yeah. Okay, we won't even go there. Yeah.
Oh.
How about self-destruct?
Self-destruct, and everyone's like, well, why don't they pull the Flash movie? Ezra Miller's toxic. I'm like, because they don't have to put any more money into it, and it's complete. If Ezra Miller's Flash movie was at the same point of production where Batgirl is right now, and Zaslav came in,
it probably would go.
Yeah, been cut, no problem. But at this point, they could put it on DVD, and just whatever they get back on it now is money. It's a guaranteed loss if they don't do anything with it. It's still a tax write-off, I guess, if they did that too. But
yeah, they'll be having a couple of Flash, it sounds like.
Yeah, so they can recoup something with the Flash. But what I do watch on streaming is I've got Netflix and I've got HBO Max, and so I've been watching Sandman. Um, and I picked up Sandman every month when it was New Comic Day and it was a new Sandman. I had it. It was the last thing I would read that night because I always wanted to save the best for last. Anything I read after Sandman was going to be downhill. It was sort of like, you always save dessert for the end of the meal.
Yeah.
And
Neil's a great writer. I mean, he's a great person too. If you ever get a chance to meet him, I mean, he's just a class act. I have to admit, I never read him. I was selling him in a store, and it was one of my top selling books. And then I even had kind of a Sandman type of thing in some of my advertisements that I had commercials running on local TV. And the Sandman graphic novels, those were evergreens. Those things you kept constantly in stock, and they constantly kept moving. I mean, until they stopped making them. And when I heard about the series, I thought, finally I'll get a chance to check it out, because I was like, I knew they tried to make a whole bunch of bad ones, and I've read some of the lines for some of those things. Like, oh my God, they didn't make them.
Yeah.
There was some awful stuff. Like mightier than Mastodon, almost type beat your chest type of stuff. It's for the Sandman talking. Like, yeah, that's not going to work.
I talked with Neil in an interview about that 22 years ago, and he's like, "Oh, you saw this script here," and I can't remember who the producer was going to be, and it had dialogue in it like "foolish mortals." Mwah.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, that's what I thought. Mightier than Mastodon. Just like, okay, yeah, that doesn't sound like something he would write. And
no, it definitely wasn't.
Hey,
Mike, thanks for popping in and sharing the stream. Always happy to have you here. But I will say that, in watching it now, I mean, Sandman's popularity went beyond the books. I mean, Hot Topic, I think, exists because Sandman existed. There were, all these girls wanted to wear, black halter tops and go pale and, paint it influenced goth culture, propped up goth culture, I would say, helped it stick around longer. But watching it now, I've said this before, Sandman, a lot of the episodes are probably the closest to the comic books of any other series that's out there, as far as the dialogue and the pacing and the actual actions that happen. But it goes out of its way to remind you that it's changed things. And that keeps pulling you out of the story when you realize, and a lot of it's unnecessary racial changes. If I say it was an unnecessary change, well, then it doesn't really matter. And it doesn't. Making death, casting death as a black woman was an unnecessary change, and ultimately meant nothing because she's a good actress. She pulls off the lines. There's nothing in there that, is where she's saying something special because about her blackness or something. So there's not any of this political ideology. She just happens to be played by a black actress. But it's when you see, like, okay, Death is black. Okay, Lucian is black. Okay, Rose is black. And you start, it sticks out.
Yeah, it's like when Neil was first talking about it, I was reading one of his interviews, and he said, he's going to be more inclusive than ever. This is going to be all about being inclusive on that. And I got to tell you, watching this thing with, I knew a little bit about it just from having sold it. That's why I knew a lot about what you're talking about before I got into it, and so I noticed a lot of changes. Like all of a sudden, John Constantine is Joanna Constantine. But I do have to say that if I was making a movie of one of my creations and I had a chance to get Jenna Coleman in it, all right, let's make the change. I mean, I've always been a big fan of hers.
I'd have cast Jenna Coleman as Morpheus, period. I mean,
let's just
although she would have made a great death.
Yeah, so she'd be good in anything you get her in a movie. That's what you got to do. But when he was talking about how it was going to be all inclusive, I got to tell you, as a straight white male, I never felt so excluded in my life. There was not one character in there I could relate to. I mean, Jenna Coleman was the most macho character in there, and I just I felt excluded. I just like, well, this is not for me. Well,
they have to use Johanna Constantine, and a lot of the argument before the show came out was, well, they've gender swapped John Constantine, and people were like, well, actually, if you read the books, she's in there. I'm like, yeah, she's in there like 200 years prior, because she was an ancestor, and she was introduced in the book. So Sandman created Johanna Constantine. The writers created that character, so they have the rights to use her. But they used her in the past, and then they had another Johanna Constantine about present time,
Mhm.
and it was obviously a switch. Now, that's the hardest switch to get past, I think, for a viewer, the most jarring, and it was driven by politics, not storytelling politics, but by contracts. They didn't have the rights to John Constantine. They couldn't get the rights to John Constantine.
Same thing with Lucifer. I mean, I watched that series, and it's I was like, hey, I wonder if they're going to have that. No, he wasn't there.
He wasn't there. Now the Lucifer series was the least thing that was ever like a comic book ever. It's like because I read Lucifer and it was never anything about I'm going to go to Earth and I'm going to become a police consultant and play around with crimes, catch people. Yeah,
Well, they didn't have a good opening line as the death of or not death, but Devil decided to take a holiday.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I'll give it a try, and I ended up watching the whole thing.
Yeah, Tom Ellis is a fantastic Lucifer. In fact, when I don't know if you watched the Crisis on Infinite Earths CW special they did.
I watched just a few of just the actual Crisis. Yeah.
Okay, so when John Constantine takes him to Earth 666 and knocks on that side door, and Tom Ellis steps out, I was like giddy as a 14-year-old girl to see him unannounced to this. That was a secret they kept held close. So I was very, very happy to see him there. But yeah, that's I don't know. I'm still watching it. I've got hopes for it. It's the good is really good, and the bad is just like why. So
yeah, I can tell it's a well-written story. I mean, it goes places, does things. There were a few episodes like, wow, that was hard to get through. Some of it I couldn't relate to a lot of the elements, but like I said, there's just no characters in there. There's been shows I've tried to watch and I eventually dropped out because I was like, I just can't connect with it. I mean, there's nothing in there that interests me, and so. No matter how good the storytelling is, I got to be interested in some of the characters. Like, yeah, that's somebody I can relate to, and I want to know what happens to them. Now, well, that was a good story, but man, those characters, I just don't know anything about them.
I wish it had all the same showrunners, but it had gotten sold to HBO Max instead of Netflix, because then all the Warner characters might have been able to stay with it. There's the biggest hit is where the Hector Hall character is in there. I mean, Hector Hall exists because he's Hawkman's son. He was being the superhero, the Sandman. And the book series addressed that and why that was happening, even though he was supposed to be dead. He was a ghost, and that whole storyline ganked out and becomes something else, because even though he can't be Sandman, he still has to be there to father Daniel, who's going to make a big appearance, at the end of the series. It all builds up to Daniel as the new Morpheus. And he's got to be conceived in dreams. Lyta Hall's got to be there. Lyta Hall's not Wonder Woman's daughter of Earth 2 now, or not a Fury yet. We'll see where that goes.
Yeah, well, I hope they do well. I mean, regardless of whether I keep watching it or not, I wish all the success. I like to see comic books movies do well. I mean, like everything I sold wasn't necessarily going to be anything I was going to read all the time. So I just like to see them do well-told stories. And I know Neil's going to do a good job of that. He's got a really solid following, and so they seem to be pretty happy with it. So that works.
Yeah, I would have just liked to have seen there was a scene in The Wake, which as somber as most of the Sandman is, it has its funny moments. And there was a scene where everybody attends the funeral of Morpheus in their dream. Everybody has the same dream. They're all at the funeral standing around. They'll forget it when they wake up. And they're in a corner of a room is Superman, Batman, and Martian Manhunter just standing in like a circle, like looking at each other and talking. And Superman is saying, do you ever have that dream where your entire life is just a series of television episodes that come week after week? And Batman says, doesn't everybody? Yeah. And John Jones says, I don't. It's like, well, yeah, because you didn't have a TV series. These other two guys did, and I thought, it was funny to me.
Oh yeah, Neil Gaiman was a great writer. I thought the Doctor's Wife, his episode of Doctor Who they wrote, I thought that was one of the best episodes that they did of the modern Doctor Who. That was great.
When the TARDIS gets a body, that was a really good episode.
That was fun, and he did a good episode for Babylon 5, Day of the Dead. Everybody's dead relatives come back to visit. And,
Neil's a hell of a writer.
Oh yeah, and he's great.
I don't know what he's written lately, but he doesn't really have to anymore. I mean,
I tried to watch American Gods, but that was another thing. I was out. I watched the first season, and
that was way different than the book. Way different than the book.
It didn't stick with me either. And I was like, I mean, it was well done, but I was like, I was out.
I think Neil Gaiman is at the Alan Moore portion of his career when it comes to adaptations now. And by that, I mean, Alan's never really liked any of the adaptations of his work. He doesn't want his name associated with it. And there was an interview where somebody asked him, like, hey, what do you think of, what they've done with League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the film?
Wow.
And he was like, well, what am I supposed to think about it? I mean, somebody came to me and said, hey, we want to make a movie that coincidentally has the same title as one of your books, and here's a bucket of money. I took the money and let them do what they wanted with it. So it's okay, go on. It's not mine. It's your thing.
That was an awful one.
Mike is talking about his show last night over at the Mike stand, where every Friday night he does the comic book retrospective. And he's been going through, you've had people come in your store before and say, where should I start reading comics? Mm-hmm. Mike just went back to the first one. And he's been reading them online from scans from the Golden Age. And he is up to June of 1939, which was what was covered last night. So I was with him. We were reading some amazing mystery funnies, some keen detective funnies, all this stuff from Centaur. Did much of that go through your store? Did you ever get to touch on the really, really old stuff?
Didn't get to see a whole lot of Golden Age comics. I had one customer come in and said, I want you to buy me every Golden comics there is, but I only want to pay 50 cents a piece for it. I was like, yeah, well, good luck with that, buddy. We all
good luck.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. 50 cents, but I want them all. Yeah, okay. Yeah, here's your action number 1 for 50 cents. Yeah, that's going to happen.
That's going to be like taped together from decomposing under a garbage dump. Yeah, and even then, I think it'd be 100.
I know. Yeah. Yeah, it's just crazy. Like one time I had a kid send me a letter going, hey, I'd like you to send me a list basically of every character who ever existed, every encounter they ever had, every team up they ever had, blah, 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 blah. And he didn't even send a return envelope. I was like, yeah, that's about 100 books of writing that you're asking a question on.
Yeah.
Be serious.
Send him an order form with the Overstreet price guide. It's all in there. First appearance, team up, crossover. Yeah,
there's your package. Yeah, but yeah, I never really saw very many Centaur comics come through. Yeah, I love the Golden Age when I could find it, but it's people have been on to Golden Age comics for a long time, and it's they've been hard to find.
I've got very, very few in my personal collection, and it's more of a character focused kind of collection. At one point, when I had all of the Teen Titans in my collection before, I got, before marriages and bills and sales and rebuilds, I used to have the entire run of the new Teen Titans and most of the run of Teen Titans, including the Brave and the Bold Robin, Kid Flash, Aqualad book. And I set up myself this impossible because I'm just going to get all their appearances. And the comic shop guy I was talking to at the first night, I was like, yeah, good luck with that. More Fun Comics costs about $15,000 right now. It's the first Speedy. I was like, okay, well, maybe not all of them. All the appearances.
Yeah. Yeah. My personal collection, I don't even have any superheroes in my collection because I never was a superhero guy. I've got the Edgar Rice Burroughs stuff, the Disney Duck stuff. I was a big fan of Carl Barks and, of course, the Tarzan and Burroughs stuff, John Carter of Mars. And, the other thing I collected was, Robert E. Howard stuff. Well, that was, Bronze Age up, so that was pretty accessible. I was able to get almost all of that new off the rack, which was really nice when I was doing my Robert E. Howard chronology scans because I had all these pristine books. I didn't have to do all that restoration like I did on the Burroughs one, where you had old pulps going back over 100 years.
Yeah, I mean, if it's already in your collection, that makes it a lot easier to work with.
And actually, just a couple of weeks ago, I discovered an unknown Robert E. Howard pulp.
Really, a film?
Yeah. What's that?
A film, you said?
No, a pulp.
Poem.
A pulp magazine with unknown pulp magazine with Robert E. Howard content that nobody knew about, and it came out. So I was buying, to try to get interior scans of the art, because a lot of this art's unknown. Nobody's ever reproduced the header art that would go with the story, and so I've been trying to pick them up wherever I could to have that I can reproduce them. And also, I can identify who the artist is because this stuff's unknown. And so this one guy, advertises one pulp, and I was a high bidder on it and showed out a lot of money. In comes the pulp, and I'm like, the title page has been cut out. The Robert E. Howard story has been cut out. I was like, dude, this is not what I was buying. He's like, no argument, I'll take it back. But before, I think he was wondering why some of his Western magazines weren't selling for squat, and then all of a sudden, boom, several $100s. And so then he realized, oh, Robert E. Howard. So he started looking on these pulps, and he had there was one pulp called Smashing Novels, with a story in there, The Vulture of Wapiton, although they changed the title and changed it to Vultures of Wapeton on the cover and on the story. Well, so he finds a pulp that's advertising that nobody knew about it. And not only does it have the header art and the title, but it also has a chunk of the opening part of the story. So there's Robert E. Howard text. So that's actually a Robert E. Howard thing, even though it's not a complete story. But here's the interesting thing about it. It had the title right. When the original publication in Smashing Novels, they called it Vultures of Wapiton, like I was saying. But this one, they corrected it to Vultures of Wapetown. So this January 1937, Western has the correct title, and nobody knew it existed. And I snatched that up. I'll get a thing going on it. And of course, the Robert E. Howard people are like, wow, it's just spreading the word around, which is a great advertisement for chronology when it comes out. Like, this guy discovered this while he's making that. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, this was crowdfunded a while back. I mean, it's funded. Yeah. So you've got a lot of people who are anxious to see this. Are you still on target for the planned delivery date?
Well, we were trying to get it out by the end of this year, and although unfortunately, when they advertised it as February of this year. That was just like a placeholder thing. So that'd be the absolutely soonest I might be able to have it all written. And so that's what they put it, and then they didn't ever change it when the Kickstarter started. So so people think I'm late. I'm actually ahead. I actually hit the target. I mean, because I said my minimum, I definitely can get it done by this date, and I got it done by that date. But boy, I really had to work a lot of long hours to do it, and so it's a good thing I was pushing for it to try to get that done early, because otherwise I might not have made it. But now I've got to still build 1,500 pages. I know what goes on every page. I got all the stuff gathered now, got everything written, got all my scans, my images are processed, just ready to load. But I'm still needing some information in it, because this is a whole new software package I'm using. I was like, okay, well, get me the template. So I already built one of the volumes in another program. It's like, oh, we can't use that one. That's not a good, we need something different. Yeah. Like, okay, now I got to redo 365 pages. And so I said, okay, well, I'll get me the stuff this time, so I'll build it right first time. I don't want to, we did it. Oh, do it again. Do another 365. I was like, no, I want to get it right this time. And so I'm waiting for that information. So while I've been waiting on that, I went ahead and knocked out my next Wild Stars novel, which is due for me to turn in to Kursova Publishing. So I finished Wild Stars 7. It's a wild one. That's, of course, Wild Stars. It better be wild.
It should be.
Yeah. But this one I described to the publisher is this is kind of like Dirty Harry meets the Wild Stars. I got a Wild Stars story that ran in that Multiversal Scribe magazine I was told you to put out in '77. And it's kind of like this tough cop, and he's like a background character. Well, now in this novel, we reprinted that story in the Wild Stars 5 book collection that just came out. And which collected Wild Stars 5, and we threw in some extra material, including that one in another unpublished story. And Wild Stars 6 is running now. Well, this is Wild Stars 7 that will run next year. And so the book publication is like still a couple years away. But then I kind of took this character, put him to the forefront of this story, because I needed to get that other one into the canon of all the Wild Stars coming out now. And so you tell I've had this thing planned for so long, and it's nice to finally tell these stories. And so, bam, I knocked it out in 3 weeks, because this has been rattling in my head. Let me out all this time. Like, okay, here you go. And there's never a point, okay, what am I going to, I just always, okay, when I come to a point where I don't know what I'm going to write next, and I'll take a break, that never happened. 3 weeks later, 2:30 in the morning, I'm done.
Yeah, I love it when they happen like that. It doesn't happen to me nearly often enough. For me, it's like I'll have a story idea, and I'm like, okay, but how do I build a book around the story idea? It's like, this would be a really neat thing. But
see, one of the things I'll do is, while I'm still, it's percolating, I guess you might say, in my head while I'm doing other projects, I'll make notes. Okay, well, here's an element I want in there. Here's another element. Throw that in a file folder. And then when it comes time to write it, then you start pulling out all your notes, and you ever do start to slow down, that just carries you right on through. Oh, yeah, this is what I was going to do here. You might have forgotten about it. Well, there's your note to remind you. Yeah, this is that element.
Sometimes I'll just take like 2 plots and make them one book. I'm like, okay, they're just like, and that works out well too, because it's like, it's not just one single focused thing the whole way through. There's other things working together, and then I can just make them connect.
You got to have layers if you want to have a really good story.
Yes, you do. Comics. That's what we come to talk about.
Well, speaking of comics, I do an online strip for the Edgar Rice Burroughs people called Beyond the Farthest Star.
Exactly.
Which is based on Edgar Rice Burroughs' short story published. And then he had another short story. He was actually going to do 4 of them. And he would always take 4 short stories and put them into a book. Well, he wrote Beyond the Farthest Star. He'd written a sequel to it called The Return of Tangor. And then these rotten Japanese came and dropped bombs on his doorstep because he was living in Pearl Harbor at the time. So he was an eyewitness to the attack of Pearl Harbor. Bam! Next thing you know, he quit writing for a while, and he became a war correspondent. So he was out there with all the fleet as they swept across the Pacific and recaptured the islands and beat the Japanese back. And so that was in it. He never wrote anything more. Never did the next 2 that would have completed it. Return of Tangor was published for the first time when they did Tales of 3 Planets. So they did, they mixed several things. They did the Beyond the Farthest Star, which had been published in magazine format, and then for the first time published the next chapter of it, which was The Return of Tangor. And then they added an unpublished first chapter of a new Venus novel he was writing called The Wizard of Venus, but he only got the first section of that one done. And then another standalone short story that he'd written called Resurrection of Jimberjob, where they thaw out an ancient man, kind of Yahtzee as we call him now. He was writing a story about a Yahtzee guy, except they brought him back to life. He was still intact enough they just reanimated him. And so they put that all together in a book called Tales of 3 Planets. And I've been doing the adaptation of those and working with a fellow by the name of John Lucas. And he helped me. He was the penciler and the inker. And we did 100 episodes that adapted Beyond the Farthest Star and The Return of Tangor. Yeah, that's
this guy?
That guy.
Okay.
Yeah, John's a very well-established artist. And I tell you what, when he's on his game, he can be as good as anybody out there. And so we did 100 and finished the Burroughs adaptation. And, I've already got the next 30 scripts written, and I'm sending them to him. He goes, oh, by the way, I'm not doing any more. As we hit the end, like, okay. So we've been searching for another artist. And so we finally, but there've been other artists who've been interested in it, but, there's a certain level you want to keep it at, and you don't want to, there are people who, don't know how to draw all these different things and don't have that experience, and you don't want them to have to learn. And you got primitive section of the story, and you want to keep it top grade. And so the Burroughs people hired. They just finally finalized the contract with him, a fellow by the name of Silvestri Salagi. And I am probably butchering his name because it's an Argentinian name. I'm just sounding it out phonetically. But he's a very well-established artist. He's done a ton of work for the Argentine market. He's also done a lot of international work in Britain, Germany, Italy. He did like a 500-page story about aerial battles in World War II, which, hey, doing a book about Pelota where you have a lot of aerial battles, he's got that background. And he's also done an online strip for Burroughs already where he illustrated the last 50 episodes of The Mad King. And so that's wrapped up. So now he's coming over and going to work on my Beyond the Farthest Star. So I already sent him the first 30 scripts. He just signed the contract this week. I already got him the scripts. I
was trying to look him up, but I did not get anything other than stuff. I put in Salvatore and Burroughs, The Mad King, and I just got R.A. Salvatore and
Silvestri,
Silvestri.
Yeah, Silvstre, and Salagi, I think it's Sylagyi.
Oh yeah,
Y-I.
Szilagyi. Yeah, that's okay.
Now you know why I said I apologize for getting the name wrong, because I'm sure I did.
Be interesting to get him on the show possibly sometime here.
Well, ask him about that. Now, of course, we're probably running into trouble on the time schedule there, because I don't know where they are, down in Argentina as far as time zones. But
I was going to say Argentina is like straight south, so it should be okay. But
he tends to write me like really late at night, and I'm writing him back in the morning. So just the way our work schedules are. But
that could just be that he likes to work at night or something too.
Me too. I admit I'm a little bit of a night owl. That way, I just go until the work's done, and it doesn't matter if it's midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock, or even 6 o'clock in the morning. If I'm pushing for a finish, I'm going to go for it. But yeah, so he's on the project. Now, one thing he has done for an American comic, you can probably look him up on. He did the Phantom for Moonstone back in the early double aughts.
Okay, well that's way back.
Yeah,
When did that become way back? The 80s were still last week for me.
Yeah, 2007 or to 2010 thereabouts. So
Okay.
he's a very well-established artist and got a lot of experience. So I'm looking forward to working with him. Now, he's going to take over the coloring because he was doing the coloring to Mad King. And, I was doing the coloring on Beyond the Farthest Star. But I was like, yeah, you can just let him keep on doing it.
Because I was going to ask if you were like making new stories in that era or if you were adapting. And you just said you were adapting.
Yeah, see, we've adapted the 2 Burroughs stories. Now, the next story, there's a little bit of a chronology here. The next story is going to be To the Nearest Planet. That was written by Todd McCaffrey, Anne McCaffrey, the girl who did the
Dragons of Pern.
Dragons of Pern, yeah, the dragon lady. That doesn't sound right. And but it's her son, and he wrote a little short story. So I'm putting that next in, and then after that's done, then I'm going to do an adaptation of A Soldier of Pelota, written by Lee Strong, and that just came out a couple years ago. So that's a novel adaptation. And then what telling the Burroughs people what I want to do after that. Then I want to do an adaptation of an unpublished Burroughs story. He just did the opening fragment, never completed, called A Ghostly Script. And it's about a black man who was riding with Roosevelt's Rough Riders up San Juan Hill, gets shot and killed, goes to a planet where, hey, that's is that Helena Troy? And and the whole thing, people die, they go to another planet. Well, that's the whole concept of Beyond the Farthest Star. So I'm like, okay, well, Ghostly Script was happening on yet another planet in this circle. And so, I want to kind of incorporate that and then do an original story, ties it all together, which I've actually been setting up since the very first episodes. I've had a long-term plan.
So that was the concept, was people would die and then they'd end up on this other planet?
Right.
Because that's what Jose Farmer did with Riverworld.
See, he was also. I was given the opportunity to complete this, the Ghostly Script, and so was Philip Jose Farmer, and he took a look and said, "I'm just going to do my own thing." And, I'll just take that concept and I'll just write my own thing. I'll just take all the credit for myself there. And so,
oh my God,
that's where that came from. Yeah, it was from a Ghostly Script, and and he did. I'm going to do something different than what he did.
Okay, but
yeah, that's where
devious.
Yeah, he was given the opportunity to finish that. He goes, I think I'm just going to call it Riverworld and make it my own.
Okay. Well, yeah, that was back in the days when you just didn't think about, you trusted people.
Well, I mean, he had a real tight connection with the Burroughs people and did a lot of offshoot and a lot of kind of quasi related stories. So, I don't think any grudge was ever held or anything like that. But, and, it's just the start of the idea is what's in the book. And, but here I'd written that young Tarzan story, and nothing had happened with it because other people had all the rights at that time. And like, well, I don't want to write this novel unless I have a contract. I know what's going to happen if I do all this work. Well, we never got the contract. And so I had a lot of ideas what I was going to use for the world I was going to do. Finally, I just said, well, fine, I'll use those elements for my Wild Stars 3 world that a place I've got them going in Wild Stars 3.
Speaking of contracts and rights and copyrights and trademarks, Dan Lawless is asking, are the Burroughs stories public domain? That's a minefield, but
yeah, some of them actually.
The short answer is yes.
But names are trademark, and so a lot of the story titles are trademark. Princess of Mars, John Carter, Tarzan, that's a trademark. So you can't reprint Tarzan of the Apes because it's trademark. The name is. And that's why when Dynamite started publishing some Tarzan comics and they didn't want to go get the license, they said Lord of the Jungle. Later they did get a license and then started doing Days of Thors and other stuff. And that mixed results there. I mean, some of it was good, some not so much. But beautiful artwork though. On the cover.
D.W. Ken was on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he had his jungle book Zadar, the Savage. And it was he said it was supposed to be a Tarzan book, and that they were working with the Burroughs company, the Burroughs estate, to get things out. And it was like, yeah, this looks good. Yeah, this looks great. We like this. We like this. We like this. We like this. And it came down to the last moment. It's like, hang on a second here, and started slowing things down. And he said, and the team decided, you know what, change the name. And it'll be our own jungle guy. It's a really good book, and if it'd been Tarzan, it would have been a really good Tarzan story.
But I've written one of those too. I think I've talked about it on the show before, where basically I reinvented Tarzan for modern readers and sent it in. But by the time I sent it in, they were already into this whole relaunch where they were launching their own authorized editions. So they were just neck deep in that. And they kept saying, "We're going to get to it. We're going to get to it." Well, just the last couple of weeks, they've started getting to it. So I started going through it and reading.
Yeah.
So we'll see what will happen with that. And I've told them, say, hey, if you don't like it, I'll change the name and it'll be an homage novel, kind of like what that fellow did.
Yeah, it's kind of like when it's a character, a trademark character, it becomes a whole different ballgame. I mean, you can find Cosmic Courtship. That's a story in the public domain. You can reprint that as The Cosmic Courtship by Nathaniel Hawthorne or Julian Hawthorne.
Yeah.
No problem. But,
Which
Tarzan, which you did. That's why I bring it up. But, any of the Tarzan books, which are public domain, can you reprint them if you change the title?
Well, I think you can actually do public domain publications of the books, but I don't know how it works on those titles. I'm not sure what.
Yeah, because you can't title anything Tarzan.
Right, exactly. It's a trademark, and that's one of the things I was telling the Burroughs people. When I was first working with them on my chronology, I said, "Why aren't you doing your own books? You got the stories. Just create your own print on demand books. Just don't let other people be the only people out there providing your stories to the market." And I said, just put your new artwork in it. Then you've got a unique edition, and they can't just completely copy what you're doing. And matter of fact, I made a pitch with him with another publisher where I would put the packages together for them and use all this vintage artwork that I collected together, making the chronology, and have somebody else publish it. And they said, that's a good idea. We'll just do it ourselves. I'm like, okay, fine. At least you're doing it. That's the main thing.
Yeah. Now the Tarzan stories in United Features Syndicates, Tip Top Comics. I know that you're seeing those online, scanned copies, Mike. But
That's licensed. That is licensed. Yes, Tip Top. What it was is those were collecting stories that were run in the newspaper. So that was syndicated stories, and so that was all licensed with the Burroughs people. And
yeah,
they had a rule that you can't use more than 20% of the words from the novel.
Ooh. Okay. So the people who are writing the strips could only use 20% of the words, which was kind of easy because you're just taking the dialogue.
Right. And so initially they were, doing adaptations of all his novels. Then eventually that spread onto making original stories.
Yeah. But Mike is watching. Mike Walters is pulling them up off of websites where the pages have been scanned, and you can read entire comics from the Golden Age that have fallen into public domain. But see, now this is a public domain comic that has a licensed character inside it.
Let's put it this way: you find somebody selling a reprint of it, they will take those Burroughs pages out because they don't actually have the right. Now what happens online? I don't think anybody's really chasing after that too much, at least not yet at this time. But in print, yeah. Matter of fact, I discovered a hardcover edition of a British book that they didn't have the rights to do a hardcover. And they're like, don't even list this in your chronology because we don't want to even acknowledge that they got away with that. And so I just listed the paperback, did a list of the hardcover. I've got the hardcover in my collection of an unknown book edition from Britain called Tarzan of the Apes. And they even pulled an image from those strips by Brune Hogarth for the cover. So,
wow.
They're like, I'm going to give a call, but of course the woman who managed that contract, she was no longer with the company. And last I heard, nothing had really come out of that. But yeah, they weren't authorized to do a hardcover edition, just a paperback edition. So
was that a recent thing, or was that like a much older thing?
This happened back in the 90s, early double aughts.
Okay. So they probably didn't get to print that many of them then if they did get caught at it.
Yeah. And, like I say, people have all changed at the company, this and that. And so, like I said, I may be one of the few people who actually has a copy. Who knows how many they actually made.
Oh, okay. And Mike is saying that the Tip Top Comics, when he does read them online, they take out the Tarzan and Little Abner stories.
There you go. That's why.
So, okay. So now we know we're learning how this copyright and trademark thing.
Now, if you go to gocomics.com, they are rerunning these original strips. And but it's just reprints of strips that have run because that's all syndication. That's all licensed with the Burroughs people. But if you go to edgarisburroughs.com, that's where you can find new strips being released every week, once a week, and which is where my Beyond the Farthest Star are published. And you can find links to them on my website. If you go to my website, www.thewildstars, TARS.com, you'll find where I've got a page where I'm promoting Beyond the Farthest Star. Now, when I say I'm putting teasers on there, I am really teasing you. These are a lot of times I'll say, here's the story that is going to be, and that's not the story at all. That's just joking around. And just talking like, what? They're doing what? Yeah. Then you go and you can actually click that link and go to their website and get 4 free episodes. But you want to keep on reading their website, then they're like, okay, buddy, you got to pay that subscription. And it's not much.
Yeah. And that link, I've just put it in the chat, but it is also right below the video, Michael's link. Why are my fingers not? It's like, I'll do like this. And I'm like, I'm not even. What's wrong with me? And it's not mirrored, so I can't get it straight. It's down there.
My camera always has me off looking out to the side, so I'm always trying to well, that's not what I'm trying to do. But but on my links on the website, when you click on it, it'll actually take you to their website. And so you can go from there. So you don't have to go searching for it. You go to my website and you read a few of the jokes and, Clamps to Claws, he doesn't exist. That's a background character and an image, and so I went through a whole several episodes. Like, looks like Tanger's dead, so next issue be back for the new adventures of Clamps to Claw. Some critter with pincers, and there was no. He was only in one episode.
You'll have to make a plushie of him now, or an actual strip. He'll get a life of his own if you keep doing that, because fans will turn it into something. They'll turn it into a meme or something.
Yeah.
Before we close out, comic books. Let's talk about they still make those apparently.
Marvel's doing
in spite of their best efforts not to.
Yeah, Marvel's doing great. That new Axe, which they're teaming up with Avengers, X-Men, and Eternals. That's done very well. That's actually the best crossover I've seen Marvel do in quite a long time. And they get the best reaction from people. And the monthly titles, Marvel stick kind of to their core title. I mean, they still do a lot of miniseries from time to time, but they mainly do their ongoing monthly titles now. And even though they keep restarting, I'm like, Spider-Man just started over again. Daredevil just started over again, But, they at least they're still keeping them monthly. Where DC, it was just miniseries, unless it was Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Flash, and not much else.
Well, the Batman miniseries of the night, the Chip Zdarsky run, where he's now on the main Bat title, so his thoughts are going to carry over. We talked before the show. They have pretty much confirmed that Batman had feelings for Ghostmaker, romantic feelings for him, and anybody who read the James Tynion series prior to Chip Zdarsky, who saw this coming. I mean, this was the biggest bromance in comics, in Batman comics, anytime they were together. They're like, just working out shirtless and so, hey, I don't have a butler anymore, so you're going to have to cook, stuff like that. It was interesting. But Marvel made ruffled some feathers this past week too, because there was a convention, a bunch of fans in the room, and they one guy stood up and said, hey, are you ever going to bring Peter and Mary Jane back together and get this marriage thing going again? And I want to say it was Jordan B. Peterson basically told a cheering crowd that everybody was cheering for this idea and said, yeah, don't hold your breath on that. It's not going to happen.
There's no such thing as normalcy in comics. You can't have, used to you'd have, you'd have your firm ground, and then you have the wild stories, but you always knew there was, firm ground you come back to. Now there's just no firm ground. There's no normalcy. I mean, it's like, Magnus, a robot fighter. I used to love those comics, and Magnus was in love with Deja, Senator's daughter, and really solid relationship. Well, then Valiant starts doing, okay, well, now she's sleeping with Magnus's friend, having babies by him. And I mean, like, God, everything's so dysfunctional. I mean, yeah, dysfunctional is part of the world, but you got to have some elements. It's okay to have a rock in the world, that's something that you can depend on. There's nothing.
Bring up Valiant, and Valiant's got its own problems right now. They are, as Mike is saying here, they're going down to one book per month.
It doesn't surprise me, yeah.
And I think you could
readers. Yeah, they just weren't coming out with anything that my customers were sticking with. I don't know. Right now, I can't even think of anything that I'm ordering for anybody. I think they've all just completely disconnected with customers.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could probably buy Valiant right now for about $25.
I won't change.
Yeah. You want change back? Okay. That was I mean, that was the thing with like CW when they sold CW. I understand that they sold it for nothing.
Wow.
The sale was take over the debt. So it was almost like car for sale, take over payments.
Assume the mortgage.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of comic stuff that's not doing so well.
We have a huge opportunity here with this pandemic. People were at home. You have games manufacturers. Oh, they made out like bandits on this thing. Manga made out like bandits on this thing. Comic book industry. Oh, look, I've shot this foot. Now let's shoot this other foot. I still got some toes. Let's do something about that.
I remember going to Walmart during early peak pandemic when it's like everyone was like serious about the masks. And I would, we'd go to Walmart, get the groceries and get out, but I would wander down the toy and game aisle and the game shelves were cleared bare.
Yeah.
I mean, Monopoly was
home
not in stock.
entertainment. Yeah. It's like when the whole pandemic first started, and of course you talked about how I've written stuff for, ICV2, an online website about, comic stuff. And I haven't written a whole lot since then, but, I did an article and I said, listen, guys, this is an opportunity for us. Because there were retailers out in California because they got closed down by quarantine. They didn't want to have to mail the books. They didn't want to do Windows door service or anything. Like, just shut it all down. I was like, that's a terrible idea. We don't want to do this. Yep. Is an opportunity for us. And so that gets published in the morning. That afternoon, the article gets published by Steve Jeppe. I'm shutting it all down. And wow, did he shoot himself in the foot bad. I mean, in DC, that's what DC
with a howitzer.
Yeah. Yeah, and he destabilized. Now, he destabilized his own business and industry, but in a way, it was kind of a good thing because the service I'm getting out of DC and Marvel is so much better than I was getting out of Diamond. And you still got Diamond. I don't wish bad on Steve's. Jeppe is a friend. I'm one of his advisors on the Overstreet Price Guide. So he's a good guy. I don't wish bad on him, but he was retired there for a while and had another fellow running his company. Well, after that, he got back in and started running his business again. So he's trying to right the ship because the guy who was running it for him was not doing the good job, and he was driving me out of business. He had more to do with me closing down my stores. So I said I've had enough, and but because we're like, no, we still want books from you. Like, okay, I'll do it by mail order, and I'll take some stuff and so on. But I have never regretted closing down my retail stores because I was like 5,500 square foot of retail, and right now with the way gas prices is. It might not affect some guys in big cities where they've got like 5 million people in a 15-mile radius of the store. I've got 5 million people in the whole state.
Yeah.
And so everybody has to drive a ways to get to me. I made sure I was located right close to bus stops, both of my stores, but still not that many people rode public transit. We're very rural, and so everybody had to drive. And whenever gas prices went up, it killed my business. And so right now, DC not making anything, gas prices skyrocketing. And I'm like, I'd be dying. I would probably just be hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt from trying to keep the stores open. Instead, I'm writing my other stuff now, and I'm making a profit. I probably make a better profit than I would have even if the industry was still good. So it was definitely the right thing for me. So
yeah, Valiant just canceled Archer and Armstrong, which was one of their big titles. And Dan's hit it right here. There is nobody at the wheel of the big companies right now. They're just kind of
for sure.
Co-sign creator-owned comics. Yeah. Look,
now
badass song. You're not going to find this published by anybody. Jack the Ripper, Vampire Killer. That's our Vampire Hunter.
Yeah, that won't be published. Yeah.
Now
you see independence going out on Kickstarter. Great. Yeah, keep the product coming.
Yeah.
There's a fan page out there that wants to eat. We need to feed them. If Marvel DC won't do it, somebody else will.
I'm happy to see them dry up. I'm afraid because they're not printing the books I used to read. Right now, the only DC book I'm going out of my actual. Remember when you used to go out of your way to get a book? I was like, oh, it's not here. Well, I'm in the car. I'm going to go to Hastings or I'm going to go to the other comic shop, see if they're not sold out of it. Now it's sort of like look, comic shop. I got 20 minutes. Let's go see if something's in there and walk out with a comic. I used to never walk out of your store with a comic or any store. It's like, I'm getting as much as I can.
And, I was in competition with Hastings, and they it's kind of like what happened with the manga where they gave other chains preferential treatment over the retailers. And then now they went back into the stores like, you've told our business to go shop somewhere else. Well, Hastings, man, Marvel especially, but all the publishers at Diamond were giving them such special treatment. They were buying stuff on a returnable basis. So they were buying in huge bulk. They were getting special variants made. And then when all of a sudden Marvel and some of the guys realized, hey, we're not making any money on these guys because of all the returns. So they put them on the same terms of business as I was in. Within like 3-4 months, they were bankrupt and out of business. They could not operate on the same terms as me of non-returnability. I mean, so we retailers, we've been having to fight an uphill battle where it's just like they've been doing everything to wipe us out, destroy us, put us out of business. I think when they introduced digital, the reason they advertised it so much was because they thought, well, every retailer in America is going to collapse like a chain of Tower Records when music went digital. But what happened was they were advertising. People were like, wait, they still make comics and that I don't see at the grocery store or 7-Eleven anymore. Let me go find the real things. And all the print store sales went up. So they think they're about to wipe us out. This is a death blow. Like, wow, our sales are increasing. Like, yeah, you finally advertised.
Yeah, music was never a tangible item, with the exception of the vinyl collectors who
it was sound. The delivery system wasn't as important, and
right,
the delivery system is important because if you buy a digital comic, you got nothing. You buy a comic and it becomes collectible. Who knows what it might be worth somewhere down? I mean, look what's happening on eBay with recent comics because the print runs are so low. Back in the 80s, if a comic was 120,000, now they cancel it. That's too low for us. Oh, okay. Now we'll drop it down to 90,000. Now they're like, hey, we sold 10 to 30,000 copies. Like candles, have a celebration. That's a top seller. I mean, their print runs are so low. They used to call the print runs they have now limited editions.
Yes. Oh, but now they're happy if they buy that much.
Yeah. And so the print runs are so low. So you get a book that's got anything decent in it at all. The supply and demand, there's so much greater demand out there than what the supply will ever be. So right now is actually a good time to be investing in print, not digital. You got nothing for digital. And on top of that, the delivery system too, the tactile experience of reading a comic, your eyes are the theater. You control, the motion, the slow motion. Oh, well, let's backtrack and go revisit that paragraph. You control how the story unfolds because it's right there in front of you, and you control the projector with your eyes. Now,
I've got a whole new show topic. I'm just going to throw it out here and see where we go because I'm like, I'm getting ready to wrap up. Oh, wait. As a contributor for the Overstreet Guide and as somebody who's consulted on it, with so many independent books coming out through the Kickstarter, through the Indiegogo, through Etsy, people who are just doing their own website, Dinales.com, DINALES.com. He's just put out 3 books of The Immortal Mask, all 3 at one time. Just boom. There's no crowdfunding. It's done. Order it and buy it. Eric July, $3.7 million in sales on a #1 issue from.
There's an audience out there. Yeah.
Yeah. But will we see these books in an Overstreet Guide because they didn't come through the traditional publishing system and didn't go through the traditional retail routes?
Since I'm not selling back issues like I used to, I haven't been looking to see what the listings are. So I'm not 100% sure about that because I know there were a lot of times that there's so many independents made during the 90s and early part of the double aughts that they just said, hey, if it's not listed, the value is cover price. So they stopped listing all the comics really a while back. Now, I think they do try to get them all in there, but, I could not answer that question. I'm not sure.
Okay. So like some of the ones I just showed up here that I got from Kickstarter, like, the Reign of the Bastard Queen here from Bad Bug Media. This was a crowdfunded book. I'm just like, will I ever see a listing in an Overstreet for, this was here, this was from Bad Bug Kickstarter exclusive, stuff like that.
Yeah, I just have to actually do some research to answer that question because I hate to say nay, but it might be a yay. I mean, I'm just not sure about that. Now, one thing I will say is they finally modernized the Overstreet. They were still, and this is back when they weren't listing everything. They were still doing it to cut and paste, retypeset everything. All right, we made a change on page 1. Now we're going to reformat every page in the whole price guide. And now I think they finally computerized it. This year's price guide was the first one with color images because they'd show all these samples. They used to always be black and white. They're actually in color for the first time this year. That's new. And another thing they did this year, which is sweet for us Overstreet Price Guide advisors, is Steve Jebby had them make a special advisor exclusive edition, a unique cover old copies only given to advisors and then a few people at Gemstone and like that, and a few historians, and that's it. And the first one had a picture and Bob Overstreet didn't know they were doing it. This is the Bob Overstreet comic book price guide, and he did not know they were doing this. And this got sprung on him at San Diego Con, where they do the release every year, and they found an old photo of him reading some old Batman comics, and so then they just had they hired an artist who changed it because they knew he was a big fan of UFOs. And so they drew him reading UFO comics as all these aliens are all around him, Area 51 down the street. And so that was first revealed at the San Diego Comic Con, and that was my bonus this year. Usually they just send me like a trade paperback, and that was my payment. Well, this time I actually got a really high collectible item. And oh yeah, he's right about J.C. Vaughn. He'd probably answer that question right off the top of his head. But so we've got a unique collectible. I haven't looked. I checked a couple times to see if anybody's selling them on eBay, and haven't even seen one listed. So this is a real scarce collectible item.
Okay, cool. I was talking about the only book I go out of my way to get. As much talk as there's about Dark Crisis, it's the most boring story I've ever seen. I'm not going to get any more of them. But Flashpoint Beyond is the one that actually seems to, if I wanted to say that something would have an impact on the DC universe, I would say that was the one to follow as far as a crisis-like story goes. It's written by Jeff Johns, so it will have absolutely no impact at all. Just like just like Doomsday Clock should have changed the entire structure of the DC universe and was a complete vapor. They published it published it because they had a contract, I think, but they weren't going to let it impact anything in the universe. This is still because Johns is writing it. They're revisiting all that Flashpoint stuff that happened that kicked off the Rebirth, that kicked off the New 52, and then kicked off Rebirth. They mention, they've got in here Janie Slater's watch and the snow globe. There are Watchmen references throughout this whole thing, so it's still carrying off the whole Doomsday Clock thing. We'll see what Jeff's going to pull off, but that's the only book.
DC universe.
Yeah, I still say Dr. Manhattan created the DC universe and has done so over and over and over and over and over and over again.
And an Alan Moore creation.
Yeah, Alan Moore creation created the DC universe. That would be ironic.
Yeah.
Anyhow, Mike wants to remind you that you're always welcome to come check out his Friday shows when he goes over the old Golden Age stuff. We read them out loud. We provide voices. We have a lot of fun with it. We just kind of go through them and look at what was said, what was presented, whether or not we could tell they were just like slapping it out to get print stuff out there and make get paper in the market, or if they were actually paying attention to their own stories. All right, Michael, went a little bit over time, but next time we will be on a Friday. I'll get the new schedule out. We'll get the links, and we'll have, we get Dave and Yule back. I don't know if we can get Yule, but I know we can get Dave. We'll have longer shows. We'll have more input means more conversation. So that'd be a good thing. But nevertheless, I do appreciate you taking the time for the one-on-ones, and
always fun.
It is. I love sitting around. Sometimes I would come into your store on lunch. I was like, yeah, I know it's a Tuesday. There's no new comics, but I want to talk about comics. So we talk comics. Just
oh yeah, I'd have so many conversations in my store that go on, and I'd joke around with people too. As I told them sometimes is that look, the comics are actually free. You're just paying a cover charge.
Yeah, exactly. It's what it is. All right. So everybody in the chat, thank you so much for being here tonight. We don't have a show without you. It's just a podcast in the woods falling over. Otherwise, so we're glad you're here. And as always, while you were here, we just hope you had a blast. Good night.